Hey guys, it's Kat and I'm back today with no eye makeup, which means only one thing. I'm doing a new 1 week, 1 palette video. I do want to do hopefully a review like this every month, and I'm really excited for this one because it's probably the first time in, I don't know, over a year that I've actually done one of these reviews on an indie brand, and this one happens to be an Australian indie brand, and it's an Australian themed palette, which is very exciting. If you're not familiar with my accent, I am Australian, so this is something that I've been really excited for. So I wasn't sent this in PR, but Beauty News was sent this in PR, and since I'm half Beauty News, it was half sent to me. Hayley was cool with me doing a review, so yeah, it was sent in PR, but to Beauty News. Before I actually show you the palette and talk a little bit more about it, I'll just explain what this video is because it's a long format for a review. But essentially what I do is I take a palette that I haven't used. I have swatched this, so I swatched it on Instagram stories on the Beauty News Instagram. So I'll do swatches, I'll give you all the details, all that good stuff. And then what I do is I will show you me applying it for the first time, let you know my first impressions of the quality and the shades. And then over the next week, I will use this palette. I will check in with all the looks that I've created using all the shades from the palette. And then after I've really formed a good idea of what I think about the color story and the formula and all that kind of good stuff, I will conclude it. So that's why these reviews are quite long. It's because it's a long, lengthy process. But what I'll do is I'll have timestamps in the description box. So if you want to jump to the different looks and you don't want to hear me, explaining the nuances of the shadows and how they apply, you can skip around. It's up to you. So this is from the brand Glaminatrix Cosmetics, and it's the You Beauty palette. Now, if you're Australian, you'll know the phrase You Beauty. It's a typical one. If you're not Australian, you might not get it. So the imagery is very typical to Australia as well. This is what our sunsets look like, and this looks like a nice sort of rural, sort of country scene. And then on the back, you have the ingredients and you have the animals as well. So these are all native plants and animals on the back, which is cool. Now the palette comes nicely packed. It is a fragile product because it's hand pressed. So there'll be a ribbon around it saying handmade, which is really cool. And that's one thing to be sort of mindful of with indie products, is they often are hand pressed, and so they're a little bit more delicate. So you just have to be careful not to drop this. It's probably not the best thing to take traveling with you. It is a little bit more fragile. It does come with a box that is the same as the palette. So, same imagery, and it comes with this, this is really cool as well, the shade name definition. So there's a little card that tells you what the meanings of the shade names are. So for example, chockers, it means completely full, e.g. We can't fit any more stubbies, that's a type of beer, in the fridge, it's chockers. So it does explain the shade names because they are Australian slang, and if you are ordering this from overseas and you don't understand, they at least explain them, which I think is really cute. So it is a fairly sturdy cardboard palette. It's not too bulky, which is nice. It does have a mirror in there, and those are the 12 shades. One thing I love about this palette just off the bat is the mix of textures. So there are quite a few mattes. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. There's 2 duochromes, 3 multi-chromes, and a foil. So again, there's some really fun textures to play with, which I really appreciate. One thing I did notice when I was swatching this on Instagram, the mattes do tend to have a little bit of shimmer in them. So they look matte, but if you look close up, there's a little bit of shimmer particles, and that often is done to help the blend. So if you add a little bit of shimmer, they don't sort of stick as much to the eye and go patchy. They sort of blend a little bit better. So these are technically what they call mattes, but they do have, a lot of them have a little bit of shimmer in them. The color story, look, it doesn't scream Australia to me. I think it's just a nice color story. There are things that if I wanted to read into things a lot, I could definitely say that Bloody Oath looks like a really beautiful gum leaf sort of grey green. I could say that these are more ocean colors. We've got sort of like more desert colors here, but in reality, I think it's just a nice selection of sort of wearable colors and some neutrals to balance it out. Being an indie palette, this isn't the cheapest thing. So for the 12 shades, it's 90 Australian dollars. I'll put on the screen some currency conversions so you have an idea of what it's like. But indie handmade stuff is always a lot more expensive, but generally you get really nice qualities. Because these aren't mass produced, you do pay more for the labor and the quality of it, and also the sort of ideas. So it isn't the cheapest palette in the world, but it's not unusually expensive for indie. If you were outside Australia and you were interested in this, they do ship internationally. This was available for pre-sale, sold out really quickly. I have heard that it's coming back in a few weeks again for pre-sale, and they'll keep restocking it until interest runs out. So it's not limited edition, but it's probably not going to be there for the next 50 years. All right, so as per usual, I'm swatching with no primer or any base, and we'll start with the first shade, which is Straya. This is a duochrome, so it's this blue and it's got this sort of duochrome, almost like a light aqua sort of shade to it. I'll see if I can capture that a bit later. We have a matte. This one is Bloody Oath. I'll just build this up a tiny bit. It's a beautiful sort of grey green shade. Then we have Chockers, which is a foil. This is a bit more chunky, so it's this sort of soft lavender shade, and it is a little bit chunkier to pick up. Then we have the shade Stitch Up, which is a really dark chocolate brown. I'm not sure if you can see, but this is where I can see some shimmer in there. We have this beautiful dark teal shade here, which is, oh, it's gorgeous. I can see myself using that like as a liner or to blend out a liner. We have Old Mate, which I believe is, this might be a multi-chrome as well, or a duochrome. Wow, it's so different on camera. It's looking red gold. In my angle, it's looking brown green. So I'll try to capture that on camera a little bit. That's a gorgeous shade. We've got two more mattes. This one is She'll Be Right, and that is this sort of beautiful grey toned soft mauve. We've got this red shade, which is beautiful sort of dark red, called Budgie Smuggler. Budgie Smugglers, plural. It's looking very, very vibrant on camera, but it's looking a little bit more deep, muted red in real life. We have a couple of yellows. This one is called Whoop Whoop, and it's this beautiful duochrome. It's like a canary yellow, but it's got this really gorgeous pink shift to it. In my angle, it's just like glistening pink. We have this yellow matte. This is called Struth. And the last two shades are the ones that are probably most exciting. So we have Flamin' Galah and G'day. These are both multichrome. And why did I swatch them up in here? I don't know. But this is Flamin' Galah. So it looks like pink on my arm, but I'm seeing it as this beautiful like gold yellow champagne shade. So again, I'm going to try to capture the multichrome element of that. But it is beautiful. And then this shade G'day is the like crowning glory of the palette. It almost looks grey, blue grey in the on camera, but then it has this beautiful sort of orange gold flash to it, and it's super foiled. It's gorgeous. So I should have started further down. Why did I do this to myself? But those are the shades. They're beautiful. I'm hoping if I hold up this mirror, you'll see some of the multi-chrome element to it. So you can see how Flamin' Galah captures more green yellow in the mirror than it does pink. And you can see really that vibrancy of G'day. I can't really capture the pink of that light yellow, but yeah, you get it. Those are the shades. It's a nice, beautiful mix with different finishes. I love it. It's gorgeous. All right, so after swatching, the pans did hold up fairly well. I do want to say the mattes do have a tendency to have a bit of kick-ups. They are quite soft, and this foil is a little bit chunky. This one's a little bit chunky too, but so you're going to be quite delicate with them. When I was swatching, I think the blue, it did sort of flake out and jump into other pans. I blew it away because I didn't want to sort of mix it into the pan when I was swatching, but just be careful that they are quite soft. All right, on my eyes, I just have Painterly Paint Pot. I put it on a little while ago, so it's probably a little bit set. And I do have some dermatitis here, so just ignore that. On a very fluffy brush, I've just picked up a little bit of the shade Bloody Oath. I just want to start that really softly in case it is very pigmented and sort of grips. This is a lot lighter, I would say, and I noticed this when I swatched it. It looks sort of darker than in the pan than how it applies. So this is not like a rich green, almost like muted pastel green, which is interesting. So Probably better for fairer skin tones, or you could put it on almost like a pastel on deeper skin tones, but there you go. It's actually really, applies really smoothly. All right, interesting. I've just taken this, and this is a high quality Hakuhodo brush, which I thought I'll just pick up this shimmer shade, this like multi-chrome beautiful shade on, but it's really not picking it up. I'm looking at the brush and there's only a little bit of particles, so I don't know. Look, it's gorgeous. But it's picking up very, very lightly. This sort of gives me hope that this shade can be used probably both bold and almost as an iridescent topper. But I want it to be bold. So I don't know if it's not picking up on the brush. I don't know if it's not sticking very well to the base. Like, don't get me wrong, that's gorgeous. And that is something that I would happily even wear on a daily basis, even just to the shops, or taking my kid to the doctor or something, but I want to see how bold this can go. All right, I'm going in with my trusty glitter glue from Too Faced. At the start, I'm just going to put it on the lid on this eye because I do want to see the difference that a glitter glue can make. And again, maybe wetting your brush or just using a tackier base will get a bolder effect, or maybe using a different brush. But I just want to compare the two. I like to know what you can do with an eyeshadow. All right, let's have a look. Again, it's not, I think it's not picking up on the brush very well. I feel like this is one of those shades, yeah. Bit of glitter glue that was stuck to the brush just like picked that up really, really well. I feel like this is a shade that will probably benefit from applying with your finger if you want to get full payoff and a sticky base. But I have to say, when I just move my lid, you can hopefully see the base color matches that crease color perfectly. It's really smart they put that gray-green shade in because it actually does transition seamlessly with this multi-chrome. Right, I've just turned down the brightness so you can see how intense it can be, and then just a more subtle wash. Just putting a little bit of glitter glue to even it out. Whoa, it's gorgeous. Wow. I'm just going to run a little bit of that matte green under the eye as well. And I'm just taking the shade Fair Dinkum just on the outer corner just to deepen it a little bit. I'm just taking this pretty slow because it is a super pigmented shade. I'm just going to blend it out with a fluffy brush. All right, and because I don't want to just leave it at 3 shades, I will go in with maybe some Whoop Whoop, which is that duochrome yellow, and I'm just going to pop that just on the inner corner on my lower lash line, just for a bit of brightness. This is a really interesting shade. It looks swatched, it was like yellow and iridescent pink, but now putting it on, it looks yellow and iridescent blue. It's a very interesting shade. I'm gonna go put some liner and mascara on and I'll be back. All right, here's the final look. I just used a pencil liner. This is from Revlon, the cream gel eyeliner in, whatever this is. What's this? Private Island. This is underrated. People don't talk about this. It's amazing. It's on my waterline. I've put it just a little bit of a wing. I didn't take the liner all the way in because I wanted to keep as much of that multi-chrome showing as possible. And then I just used some mascara, and it's just Maybelline. So this Maybelline mascara. So yeah, I'm loving this. I think it's a really beautiful look. I think it's a fun way to add some blue and some sort of iridescence without it being too clownish. I feel like these blended really nicely. The mattes, they didn't cling. I'm sure you can build them up even more, but they did exactly what I wanted them to do. When it comes to this multi-chrome shade, I feel like it's one of those shades that don't really want to pick up too much with every brush. So again, you'll probably get a better effect if you want it more bold. Pat it on with your finger or wet your brush a little bit just to pick up the product, because I feel like the issue wasn't adhering to my base because it's not a sparkle, it is like a foiled shimmer. I think it was more just picking up on the brush, which again, not a problem. You just have to sort of be aware of that. But I also like that you can pick it up really softly and get like a twinkle, because that's what I would wear on a daily basis. So just with a really basic nude in the crease, I would be more than happy to wear this shade just lightly dusted all over my lid every day. I think it would be gorgeous. So yeah, I really love this multi-chrome shade, and I'm really keen to see how it works with other shades. I will try to use it more in some of my upcoming looks. But yeah, I'm really happy with how this turned out. I think it's gorgeous, and I'm keen to see what I do with it tomorrow. All right, I'm back with what should be look number 4, but I believe in this video is going to be look number 2, because I just realized I wiped my memory card without importing 2 looks worth of footage on my computer. So I'm gonna have to redo those, which is very frustrating. Anyway, let's pretend that that didn't happen, and I'll just recreate them over the next couple of days. But it also means this review is gonna be out later than I expected, so it is what it is. Today I decided to go something a little bit more bold and green. I wanted to mainly use this shade here. So this shade, technically it's a multi-chrome, and I don't know the description of the multi-chrome, but you know, in some lights it does look more green shifting, and other lights it looks more gold shifting. I did notice that when you put it on the eye, I found that it just looks like a greeny gold shimmer. So there's not any like nuances. It doesn't catch the light in a different way. Like if I look at it in different lights, I don't see too many different tones. It just sort of looks like a greeny gold. So yeah, it looks I think on the eye it's a little bit more plain than what I expected, but it is still a really pretty shimmer. Now I did have the same issue applying this as this one that I demonstrated. I had to wet my brush to pick up the product, otherwise it just applied like a light sparkle on the eye, which again is a look in itself, but I wanted it to be the main look, like the main shade all over the lid, so I wanted it to be fairly bold. I couldn't be bothered going in with glitter glue, so I wanted to just use my MAC paint pot, so I decided to apply this with a wet brush. It picked up nicely, it applied quite nicely. I do think if I used a glitter glue it would be a lot more bold, but it looks nice and pretty as it is. Now I had a little bit of a struggle trying to figure out what to pair this shade with. I felt like the yellow was a little bit too yellow, the brown was a little bit too dark, the green was a little bit too sort of grey blue toned. I sort of wanted an olive shade to go with it. So what I ended up doing in the crease was mixing all 3. So I started with the green, I then laid a little bit of the yellow, laid a little bit of the brown, and then I ultimately went back to blend it out by mixing these 2 together and then sort of mixing it together on the mirror and working that into the crease. So I did create sort of like a dirty, muted green shade, but I had to mix my own shades here. So you can definitely just use either of these shades to sort of blend out this middle shade, because it's sort of like a middle spot between the 2. I did an all yellow look yesterday, which obviously you can't see. I'll see if I can recreate it. So I didn't want to use just the yellow because I felt like it would lean very yellow. And I didn't want to use this shade alone because I didn't want it to be too cool toned. So I think what I'm trying to say with this shade is that there wasn't one shade that sort of mixed with it perfectly just to blend it out and complete the look, which is often what I like to do for an easy look. You just put a shimmer all over the lid and get a shade that complements it and sort of blends it out and just makes it a nice seamless sort of blend. I felt like to find a shade that worked really well with this tone of green, I needed to mix my own. So I think that's what I'm trying to say. To finish the look, I used a bit of the brown in the outer corner just to deepen it, and I also used this shade here, which is that iridescent white that shifts sort of gold to pink. I put that on the inner corner just to add a bit of brightness and to add a different color to it. Now I did add quite a bit of pink and it did neutralize the inner part a little bit, so it looks more beige, but I thought it was a nice sort of contrast. All right, so again, you can see the shimmer. On camera, it's looking a little bit more dull and green toned. In person, it looks a lot more vibrant and gold toned. So I don't know if you can see that with these studio lights. I've just been filming beauty news, so you know that's why I'm here. But you can definitely see that this sort of muted, almost army green color is that custom color that I created. I wanted something that just worked really nicely to blend out this green without changing its color. And then you can see on the inner corner I've got that pink, which again in real life it does have a bit of a pink vibrance to it. I think on camera it sort of looks a little bit more muted and champagne, but the twinkle is really pretty, the effect is really pretty, but even though it looks quite like a simple look, it took quite a bit of mixing and layering to get these exact colors. All right, I'm back to recreate the yellow look that I did the other day that I lost the footage of, but this is a bit of a tweaked version, and I think I like this version more than the last one. So look, silver lining, this is a better yellow look than what I first created. So what I decided to do was I just used my normal primer, so my Painterly paint pot. I did set the crease with my face powder, so it made the yellow a little bit easier to blend over the base. So I used this shade in the crease, and I ran it all along the lower lash line. Then I took this shimmery yellow shade, put it all over the lid, and put it on the middle of the lower lash line, so it's more like a halo eye. Then I went back in with this yellow shade and I put it on the inner corner and outer corner of the eye to sort of cover up a bit of that shimmer and make, again, that sort of halo eye effect. And the reason I did that was because the last time I did this look, I did the shimmer all over the lid and I found that it was just too frosty on me. So it is a very, very light yellow shade. And because it's got that cool tone shimmer, it does look a little bit more icy than what I usually like to go for. So I just found that putting more of that yellow matte just sort of grounded the look or made it look a little bit less frosty on me. So that's why I did that. The only other thing I did, which I did vary from the last time I created this look, was I used a little bit of this purple in the crease just to add a little bit of depth there, just a tiny bit of shadow. Whereas when I first did this look, I used the brown mixed with the yellow in the crease, which made more of a mustardy shade, which I did like, but I just wanted it to be a little bit lighter. I found that brown sort of muted down the look a little bit and overtook some of the bright yellow, and I wanted to keep it quite bright and light. I particularly like the tone of this matte yellow. I think it actually is a really flattering yellow. I think it looks better in person than it does on camera. On camera, it looks a little bit jarring compared to my skin tone, but in person it has a really beautiful, it's bright, but it looks a lot more flattering. The shade that I think I'm not super impressed with this shade here, not because it's a bad performing shade, just because when I swatched it, I thought there was more sort of interest in the shade than when I apply it to my eyes. And I found this the first time around as well. This is obviously a light sort of lemony yellow shimmer shade, but it does have this like duochrome effect to it where in some light the shimmer reflects pink and in other light it reflects like a blue sort of shade. Now when I look front on, I do see that the shimmer is catching more silvery looking, so you can see that sort of blue color to it. And when I look down into my mirror, so I've got a mirror down here, when I look down, I sort of see the pink. So I feel like to see the color shift, you have to, go to quite extremes to see it. So I feel like this shade in theory is cooler than what it actually looks like on the eye. On the eye, it just looks like a shimmery yellow with a slight cool sort of shimmer to it, which is nothing wrong with that. It just isn't as sort of special as it looks when it's swatched. So hopefully you can see that the main shade that's contributing to the color of this look is the matte. The shimmer is just more of a bit of brightness and a texture difference. I do really like how the mauve mixed into the yellow to create a bit of a shadow effect. I think that was a nice sort of pairing, but I definitely think the matte shade is more flattering and the thing that gives this look the sort of yellow punchiness. All right, I'm back with another look. I decided to use the blues in this palette today, but I wanted to make it a little bit more subtle and toned down because I'm going out and about. I've got a busy day and I didn't want like blue everywhere. I didn't want to look like Mimi from the Drew Carey show, so I did tone it down and I'll tell you how I did that. Yesterday I did do a look with the mauves. I don't know if I'll replicate that again. That was actually a replication of the look that I lost the footage of. I think I've got a photo of it. So instead of wasting another day doing that look for a third time, I thought I'll just put the photo on the screen and let you know what I used. So that was just to create a really, really nude look. So I wanted to see if this palette can create a really nude look. I just used those two. So again, really fast, really easy, really subtle. So you can get some nice subtle looks using this palette, and sort of that area is sort of where you would go for. My only issue with the look was more the foil shade. It was a little bit chunky. If you want to apply it quite boldly, you need to wet your brush. If you want to apply it kind of sheerly, you can pick it up on a fluffy brush and dust it all over the lid. That's fine. But I found just wanting to pack this on with a dry brush, it is a bit chunky. And when I first used this shade, chunks were sort of coming off in the pan and I was very gentle with it. So it is, yeah, a chunkier formula, which I'm not a huge fan of. It means it's harder to blend over the eye, and it also means the pan gets quite messy. So yeah, not in love with that formula. But today what I used, I did use a little bit of the mauve to blend out the crease. So I've got that there. All over the lid, I used a different shade, which I'll show you in a second. But then what I did was I went with this dark blue shade just in the outer corner, just blended it out so it's not super intense. And then I used this shade here, just tapped on the lid and also on the middle of the lower lash line, and I sort of diffused that as well. So it is a really pretty sort of subtle blue look. It's obviously blue, but it's not in your face crazy blue. I like this amount of blue. I think it's really pretty. What I layered that over was the ColourPop That's Taupe palette. I just used the shade down here. So I put that originally all over the lid and the lower lash line, blended it out with that mauve matte, and then went in with the blues over the top. Since this Fair Dinkum blue shade, when you do blend it out, it looks a little bit more dark, sort of turquoise, rather than blue. I ended up pairing it with a liner from MAC. This is Black Ivy. So I went with like a dark teal shade rather than a blue, because I just felt like, yeah, it blends out and mixes with the brown to create a dark teal, which I think is a pretty shade. All right, so this is the look close up. Hopefully you can see the really nice sort of topper effect that I've created with that shimmery blue. If you pack it on, I'm sure you can make a really, really bold look, but I did want this to be more of a topper over the taupe, and I think it complements really nicely. All right, I'm back with another look. I think this is look number, I want to say 6. I've lost track a little bit with the hoo-ha with losing the footage, and also I haven't used this for a couple of days. I wanted to take a little bit of a break from makeup. So I've come back with, I wanted to mainly use the red, and I wanted to try this shade again. So what I did was I put primer on. I started with the purple, so I put that in the crease and all over the lid. I then went in with a red and I put that on the outer half, and I sort of winged it out a little bit. I did use some brown wing liner, but you'll see that close up, hopefully, the shape of the red. Oh, this lighting is horrible. Can I try to adjust it? All right, hopefully that's a little bit better. I also want to note that this is very lived-in makeup. I've had this makeup on for about 7 hours now, so it's doing pretty well. And I'm just using a normal sort of primer, but hopefully you can see that the red is sort of flicked out to create more of a shape. So I did the red on the outer half of the lid, flicked it out, and then I used that sort of multi-chrome shade, so the one here, G'day. I used that all over the lid, and this time around, okay, I didn't use glitter glue, so it's not packed on really, really boldly. It is just applied with a normal shadow brush. It looks a lot more orange, reddy, vibrant. I think the first look I did that I used this all over the lid, I think because it was paired with Bloody Oath, that shade there, it almost took on a bluey, sort of goldy, shifty sort of effect, whereas now it looks really vibrant orange, red, fiery sparkle. It's really, really pretty. So I like that this shade looks different over the different shadows you use. I also really like this red in the pan. It looks quite dark, but it does apply quite vibrant. And if you do blend it out, it can look a little bit raspberry, so a little bit pink toned rather than orange toned. But I feel like if you do mix it a little bit with a yellow, you can really bring back that sort of fiery orange red if that's what you wanted. But it applies a lot brighter than what I expected from the pan. So yeah, just 3 shades at the top. Again, the mauve matte, the red, and then that multi-chrome over the top. And then underneath, I just decided to put a little bit of that brown, just run it under to create a bit of a shadow and add the shape without sort of distracting from the color. I wanted the color to be on the top. So it's one of the only looks in this video where I've put some lashes on, but I did try to keep the liner really thin and minimal So most of the lid space is taken up by the shimmer. So I'll zoom in. So zoomed in, hopefully you can see the red a little bit better. So again, I didn't pack it on. I just applied it sort of normally and then I sort of flicked it out and blended it out. Pairs really nicely with that purple and it's a beautiful base for that orange. I think that multi-chrome just looks like beautiful, like a fiery shade on top of the red. And I really like how it sets it off. I really like how the brown just sort of finishes the look but doesn't detract. I think it's a really pretty look. I think this is one of my favorite looks I've created with this palette actually. Like it's quite colorful but also really, really wearable. All right, this review is utterly cursed. Not only did I lose footage, but I've been sick for the past week and I have not used this palette or worn much makeup in the last week. So this is just a really subtle look and I think I'll try to do a more bold look tomorrow and conclude this because I've got to wrap it up. But today I wanted to mainly focus on this shade here because it is a multi-chrome shade. But since using it in past looks, I haven't really seen the multi-chrome effect of it, but I feel like I got it today, which is really good. So you can get it. It is very pretty. So the look on my eyes today, again, really simple. I'm sick. I didn't want to go anything crazy. All I did was put this all over the lid. So that's that pink sort of shimmery iridescent look. I did put the yellow in the crease and then I mixed a little bit of red and yellow together to make the orange. So I put that in the socket and also along the bottom lash line, and I used a little bit of this on the inner corner. And then what I did was I put some brown liner on and I used a little bit of the brown just to sort of blend that in. It looked a little bit too harsh against this sort of frosty shade and I wanted it to be a little bit more blended, so that's what I did. So I'll zoom in and I might turn the brightness down so you can see the sort of iridescence a lot better because it is a very vibrant pink shimmer. And then what I'll do as well is I'll try to move the camera around so you can see the multi-chrome shift because you can catch it in different lights, which is really pretty. I did want to mention as well that I just applied this shimmer just on my normal base. I didn't use any glitter glue and I did sort of put a medium amount on. You can put less on, you can definitely pack on more to make it a little bit more opaque, but I did find that the more you pack on, the more white the base sort of looks. Otherwise it looks like a transparent pink. The shift's gold and a bit of green. So we'll try to capture that, some of that now. I'll turn the brightness down so you can definitely see the pink. So you can see how vibrant the pink looks, which is really pretty. All right, let's see if we can see a bit of a shift. So you can start seeing the gold there when it captures the light in a different lighting and the gold there as well. So it definitely does shift. So pink, 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 gold and a bit of green. Can you see the green? It's really hard to see, but in person you can see it really well. It's just hard to capture on a camera, but there you go, there's a color shift. So the multi-dimensional color shift is definitely there. It's really, really pretty. And again, you can see it a lot better in person when you're just like walking past a mirror, you see all these different colors. But I find that to see it properly, you need to have the shade all over the lid. I feel like if you just put it in little areas or just dot it on the center of the eye, you're not going to see the sort of effect as much. It does need to be sort of the whole lid to get the effect and to see it really boldly, but it's really pretty. It reminds me a little bit of Stylishly Mary from MAC, but instead of it being like a glittery topper, it's more of a shimmer, an all over shimmer, which is really pretty. This would be a cool color to play layering it on top of other shades because it does have that gold, green and pink. It sort of complements the reds in this palette, the purples, the blues, the greens, the yellows. It sort of goes with everything because there's a little bit of gold, a little bit of green, a little bit of pink that sort of draws in all the colors. So this is definitely one of those shades that I think the more you play with it, the more you'll see its capabilities, I suppose, which is fun because in the pan it looks really boring and white, but there's a lot more to it. All right, this is going to be the last look for this review just because I need to get it done, and I think I've figured out what I think about this palette, so I may as well conclude it after I talk about this last look. So I only used a couple of shades today and I was going to go big and bold and try something really colorful, but I originally went to go I was going to mix the blue and the green in the crease, and as soon as I did that, I'm like, I'm not feeling it. I took it off and I wanted something a little bit more subtle. I'm still sick, obviously. So I ended up reaching for my Natasha Denona Mini Glam palette. I used the first bronze shade all over the lid, and then I used this second shade in the crease just as sort of the base. And then I went in with a couple of shades just to add a little bit of interest, I suppose. So I went in with this Chockers shade, which is that foil. It's like a lavender shade or mauve shade that has a sort of silvery shimmer to it. So I put that on the inner third of my eye. And then I took Bloody Oath, which is that, look, I originally thought this was like a grey green, but after using it a couple of times, it's more like a muted mint, if that makes sense. So I put that on the outer corner and into the crease and on the lower lash line as well. So it's only really 2 shades from this palette, but I think it's really elevated the bronze look to looking a little bit pastel and sort of whimsical and fun. And because I liked where it was going, I also used a little bit of Suva Beauty Hydra Liner in the shade Freezy, just in as a wing liner. So that's what I've done today. I'll zoom in so you can see what I've done, and then I'll conclude what I think about the palette. All right, so hopefully you can see that foiled shade on the inner part of the eye. It's added a nice sort of brightness, a bit of a mauve tone, and also a bit of lightness, a bit of silveriness. I've used that bronze to mix the 2 colors, so like a transition color. I think it's a beautiful sort of complementary shade. So I've got a bit of brightness here, I've got the bronze, and then I've got that matte sort of minty grey colour in there. I did find that this was really hard to build up. Like, it looks like it builds up really easily, but then after an hour or 2, it just looks like it's almost completely gone. So if you really wanted this shade to stand out and be really bold, you need to sort of put it on a sticky base, whereas I put it over the bronze eyeshadow and it just sort of dusts away. So yeah, it's a pretty shade and it does complement this color tone really nicely. But it is a lot more muted than what I was expecting. Really like this look. I think it turned out really well. It's something that I would totally wear just on a normal basis. But I do feel like if I was to try to put any other shimmer in between, it just would look a little bit muddled. I really feel like the bronze really helped amplify and make each shade look really pretty. Whereas if I use the yellow or that sort of greeny gold shade or something in between, I feel like it just would have looked a little bit confused. All right, so even though this review was a bit of a shit show, I lost footage, I got sick, it's a bit disjointed, I still feel like I know how I feel about this palette, and I'm going to talk about it in terms of pros, cons, and neutral points, because I feel like there's nothing wrong with this palette. I think it's a solid palette, but I do think there's not a lot to discuss, but I've got some observations and a lot of it will just depend on your personal preference. All right, so the pros, I wanted to mention that the theme is awesome. Like, I love the fact that this is an Australian brand bringing out as an Australian themed palette. I want to see more of it. I'd love to see a You Beauty #2. I think this is a really cool concept. I think the design of it is really appropriate. You got the animals on the back. I love the shade names. I love that it comes with an explanation of what the lingo means, because in Australia we're notorious for having a lot of slang and a lot of terms that many other places in the world don't understand. So I love that they lent into that. They really made it Australian, but they also explained it to people who have no idea what fair income means, for example. So I thought that that was really smart. I love this. This holds a special place in my heart, being an Australian makeup lover. So that's definitely probably the biggest pro about this palette, in my opinion, is that I have a lot of sort of emotional connection to it. Another thing I really like is the balance of this palette. I really like that there are some bright shades, there are some more muted shades, so you can tone it down, you can vibe it up. There is a nice balance. There's also a nice balance of tones. So you have sort of cool tones, sort of warm tones. You've got, you can create looks with that side, and they're sort of cohesive in little pockets of the palette. So I think it's fairly well balanced. It's also well balanced with the mattes versus the shimmers. And they do have a bunch of different textures here. So they've got a foil, they've got duochromes, multichromes. So there are a lot of different options in terms of texture, which I love to see in palettes. And I don't mind a bit of color, but you can tell that I'm fairly a muted color person. So I do like when they put shades like She'll Be Right, which is a muted purple. I found that I was using that a lot. It's still a colorful shade, but it's one that's very easy to incorporate into looks. It means that you don't have to use bright blue or bright yellow every single day if that doesn't suit you, and that doesn't suit me. So I did like the balance of this. I think the last thing that I really liked about this was the formula was overall quite nice. Look, I do think indie brands make really nicely pigmented eyeshadows, and often they have really fun, you know, effects to them. So like these two here were really beautiful multichromes, and they do give a really sort of stunning look on the eye. So I really liked the quality of this. That's going to lead into one of the cons, which I thought was this was quite a messy palette. So I will zoom in a second, but like this shade here is quite chunky, and this shade here, like I've got a big like gouges into it. This one has sealed up a little bit, like it's not unusable, it's totally fine, but I think because these are hand pressed and handmade, often you find inconsistencies with the formulas and things pick up a little bit more messy and ugly looking in the pan. This doesn't mean that it's bad or you can't use it, it's perfectly fine. But it does mean that they're a little bit more fragile. You can't really travel with them. If you wanted to take this for a weekend away, you've got to be careful that it doesn't break in your bag. It's just a little bit more delicate and a little bit messier than what I usually like to use on a daily basis for eyeshadows. I feel like it's a little bit precious. Another con for me is that some of these sort of multichrome shades or duochrome shades didn't really translate as well on the eye as they do in swatches. I feel like these two were the easiest to see the shift, but when it came to Whoop Whoop, I can see the shift in the pan. I just didn't really see it on the eye. Old Mate to me just looks like a really pretty greeny gold shimmer with like a deeper base. Straya, again, I can sort of see that there's a duochrome sort of element in the pan. You can sort of see it in a swatch, but on the eye, again, it just looked like a nice light blue topper shimmer. So I feel like even though they have some really nice finishes in this palette, to get it to translate on the eye to look as pretty as you sort of expect, I found it a little bit of a struggle. So yeah, I think for me that was a bit of a downside because the selling points of this palette was the theme, but also the description of the shades. And I feel like the only shimmery shades that really delivered the description were these two here. So the rest are pretty and they're very, you know, nice to wear and there's nothing wrong with them. They just didn't wow me as much as these two did. All right, onto the sort of neutral points. So these are just observations I've made, but it just depends on your personal preference, whether or not it's a pro or a con. So the first thing is that some of the colors, I liked them individually, but I felt like they were sort of hard to pair together. So for example, when I used Old Mate, I really struggled to find a shade that worked, complemented that to sort of complete it. So I ended up having to mix my own using, I think it was the yellow, the green and the brown. And I found that that was a common thing that I had to do. To finish a look, I had to mix the mattes because I just found that there was a little bit, it's a little bit off with the pairings. Like there were some really beautiful pairings. So like She'll Be Right and Chockers worked really well. Straya and Fair Dinkum worked well. Whoop Whoop and Struth worked really well. But when it came to some other shades, if you just wanted to use that shimmer as the dominant look and use another shade just to sort of blend it out and complement it, I found a lot of these shades sort of overtook the shimmer shade and sort of instead of completing and amplifying the look, it sort of changed it completely. So I found that I had to do a lot of mixing to complete the looks in a way that I would have liked to. So yeah, I just think for me and the way that I like to do my makeup, the color pairings were just a little bit jarring. And yeah, I think of Old Mate, it's a beautiful shade, but I would love like an olive green to really help complete that look and to allow that shadow to shine without overtaking it with blue or, you know, yellow, completely changing the color of it. Yeah, so I just didn't find that they worked as organically together as I personally would have liked. Some did, others didn't. Another note is that I just found that some shades were quite light, which is fine. I don't particularly love light eyeshadows, besides maybe for an inner corner highlight or something, which, you know, something like that's fine. I don't like light all over the lid, and I found that a lot of these lent very light. Whoop Whoop was like a very light shimmery yellow. It's not one I'd reach for most days. I much prefer this sort of deeper yellow. Chockers, even though it's pretty as an inner corner highlight, it was just a silvery purple. It's not, again, not one that I would reach for on a daily basis. And I also found that Bloody Oath and She'll Be Right, I thought they would have been nice sort of finishing makeup shades, but I found that because they were a lot lighter than what I expected, they actually looked a little bit more pastel on, like a muted pastel on the skin. And so instead of it being like a deepening sort of completing shade, it was more like a blending out shade. And I also think that that limits this palette, because if you do have deeper skin, they're going to look really frosty or chalky on you. So I found that the only really deep shades to finish off a look were the brown or the blue. The red theoretically looks quite dark, but it's actually quite bright when you put it on the eye. So yeah, I just didn't feel like there was enough depth to this palette. It all sort of seemed bright or light, which again is just a matter of personal preference, but it does limit who can wear this, and it limits how I want to use it as well. So I would see this palette more as being an accompanying palette, because I did struggle a little bit to pair the shades. So I can see myself reaching for this if I want to use a really special shimmer, or I want to pop a yellow, or I want a nice red. Like, they all perform really nicely, but together I just didn't really love the color combinations for my personal preference. And if I was to use this as an accompanying palette, I don't understand why there is this chocolate brown. This chocolate brown, even though I did use it quite a lot to blend out liners and whatnot, they're a dime a dozen. You probably have like 15 of them in your makeup collection in other palettes. So I felt like that was probably the most throwaway shade of the palette. I would have loved to have seen like a really dark plum in there to give a sort of a bit of color, and it work well with the red, it work well with the blues, it could work well with these other shades, but it's a little bit more unique. I felt like this was just a bit of a waste of space, just because it's so mundane, and it didn't really add much to this palette in terms of amplifying or complementing the other shades. It was sort of just there to deepen a look, but in the most boring way possible. So normally I don't mind browns. I just thought that in this color story, they could have done something a little bit more special. And in saying that as well, I would have liked to have seen these two shades, the minty shade and the mauvey shade, to be a bit deeper. So yeah, overall, I do like this palette. I love the vibe of it. I would love to see more palettes like this. I don't think this lived up to the hype that I had for it though. I would definitely reach for it. I'll definitely play with it more, but it's not a palette that I'm going to be like, yeah, I'm happy to wear this for the next 2 months straight, because I love the color combinations and the looks I create. I definitely love some of the looks I created, and I think that came down to using specific special shades, but I don't feel like this is an everyday palette for me, and that's fine. It's probably an everyday palette for other people. There just wasn't enough cohesiveness in the shades for me to easily approach this and create a whole bunch of different looks. So I did find that I struggled a little bit with it, but it is a nice palette. I think for the price tag, this isn't bad in terms of indie makeup, but I do think this would have been a little bit smarter if they cut it down to maybe even an 8-pan palette and made it cheaper, kept the same theme, but got rid of some shades that are a little bit more boring. I'm thinking the brown, the mauve, this foiled shade is pretty run of the mill. So yeah, if they just sort of edited this down and made it a bit cheaper, I think I would recommend it more to people. As is, like, if you love the shades or you love the theme of it, by all means, check it out. They have announced the next pre-order. And also they said that they're going to keep restocking it while the demand is there. So it's not a limited edition product. It's not going to be around forever, but at the same time, it's not going anywhere anytime soon. So if you do want it, I'll leave a link down below to where you can buy it. They do ship internationally. I do want to give a big thank you to Glaminatrix for sending this to me. I really appreciate it, and I had a lot of fun playing with it, even though I'm sick and this review has gone to shit. But yeah, it's a fun little palette, love the theme, and I'd love to see them do maybe a version 2 with a different sort of vibe. So a complementary palette, but running with the same theme, because I love the theme and I love the idea of this. So that's it, I've got to go, I've got to wrap this up. It's just taken, this review's taken like 3 weeks. 1 week, 1 palette, my ass. Anyway, thank you so much for watching. Hopefully you enjoyed that. And again, all links and information will be in the description box, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye.